everybody. Welcome to Mysteries of the Mind. This is me, your host, Sarah Soderlund, and I'm so excited to have you guys joining me this week. This means, if you're tuning in, that you are privy to social networking and that you're aware that we have had discussions on Twitter and Facebook and a little on Instagram about this month's topic. We just finished our series on evil last month, so if you're interested, check out the archives. But this month we're talking about aliens, alien abduction, alien regression, alien conspiracy theories, and just the concept of aliens in general. And for those of you who joined me on the social networking site, there seemed to be actually some interest there, some questions, some experiences. I got a lot of really cool firsthand stories, even pictures that you guys sent me. And for that, I really, really appreciate it. And we're going to hopefully cover all of that. Today's show, which you know these shows, they always go by so quickly. I can't guarantee you the excitement that the Situation Room gave you today and talking about some pretty some pretty crazy topics. But we're going to be talking kind of about Alien Abduction 101. And so here on Mysteries of the Mind, if you're joining me for the very first time, this show is really interesting because it's all about you. It's 60 minutes dedicated to you and your learning experience and hopefully delving in to your mind a little bit and just kind of having a philosophical discussion on your opinions and what you think. And one of the really cool things about alien abduction is for people who have zero experience, which I think most people will say they have zero experience, when you start walking yourself through the questions and through some of those symptoms of alien abduction, whether you're a believer or not, whether you're a Mulder or a Scully, you'll find that alien abduction is pretty common. It's very common in American society. It's very common kind of just in what our society believes to be an accepted phenomenon, whether you're a Whitley Strieber fan or, you are going to be going to the Paradigm Symposium here in less than a month, where we're going to have people who inspired stories like Fire in the Sky with their firsthand experiences of alien abduction and how it changed their life. So if you find yourself being a believer, then this might be interesting for you. So let's kind of delve into it. I know we're just going to kind of go balls to the wall here. But I want to ask your permission, of course, as I usually do on these shows, as we start the process. How do you feel about alien abduction? How do you feel about that experience? Have you had one of those experiences? So if you're one of my psychic students joining me here for the show, or if you're listening in, you have likely been given my alien abduction questionnaire. And people kind of start out this questionnaire and they really don't necessarily think they have any of the symptoms, but then they start realizing, maybe I should look into this. And if you have an interest, I don't subscribe to coincidence, I subscribe to synchronicity. Maybe there's a reason for that interest. So with your permission, let's kind of walk through an alien abduction questionnaire. So the following questions, okay, are going to help you kind of get a better understanding of the experiences that you may have had or may be having. If you don't feel comfortable answering these particular questions in your mind, just skip past it. But to the best of your ability, I want you to just relax. Take a deep breath. And in your mind's eye, describe the scenario that comes to mind. Describe what might be blank now, what comes to you, what bubbles to the surface, if you will. So, do you believe you have ever seen a UFO or strange lights in the sky? Don't think about the linguistics of UFO. Just immediately, do you believe you've ever seen a UFO or strange lights? Now, as a child or as an adult, have you ever experienced any odd periods of lost time, like an hour or a day, or even a particular segment of your life that you cannot recollect what happened? That might be difficult to comprehend, but I want you to really think. I really want you to dig down. Either as a child or an adult, have you ever experienced a period of lost time? And feel free to share with us in the chat if you're joining us at Intrepid Radio. You can chat with others about this experience. Now, I don't want you to think about whether or not this is related to alien abduction or not. I want you to just simply answer the question. Do you have any marks or scars on your body that neither you or a parent have ever really had an explanation for, or that you have any memory of how they were received? Again, do you have any birthmarks or scars that you have found or that others have found that don't have a physical explanation or memory of how they were received? Okay. Well, while awake, right? Have you ever seen a frightening figure, either as a child or an adult, in your personal space? Have you ever felt something in your closet or in your bedroom corner or anywhere else? Have you had these issues with the boogeyman, a monster, or even the devil? Some figment of your imagination that had an irrational fear? Have you ever seen a frightening figure? Now, for those of you joining me that might be of the paranormal realm, I want you to disconnect of the paranormal and the spiritual and ghosts and apparitions, and I want you to just think about alien abduction and how this questionnaire, through the mental health process, helps me connect with clients. And I just want you to naturally, honestly answer to yourself, right? You're not sharing this with anyone but yourself. Have you ever experienced an odd displacement in which you found yourself inexplicably in a location different from the one you were just in moments before? Maybe you got into your car to drive to the local gas station and suddenly you were outside of your parents' home or outside of a restaurant that you hadn't planned on going to. Have you ever experienced this odd displacement? Now, for those of you who have joined me on the show before, this odd displacement, sometimes we talk about the hypnagogic routine, where you find yourself nodding off or going in the zone or zoning out, such as the ride to work each day, where you get there and you think, holy cow, I hope I stopped at the stoplights because I don't remember driving. You just weren't consciously present. We call that the hypnagogic routine or the hypnagogic phase. How often do you experience this? How often do you zone out while doing something routine? Now we're halfway done. So kind of start thinking about how your answers are accumulating. Have you ever dreamt of being in a sterile hospital setting? And if so, how often does this happen? Do you ever dream that you're lying on a table or that you're in the horizontal position against your will? Have you had any disturbing fertility dreams where you experience babies or fetuses or even small children or other odd fertile-related images? For women especially, this is associated with, do you have any fertility issues? Polycystic ovarian syndrome, polycystic ovarian disease, endometriosis, adhesions. For males, this is a high or low sperm count that's above or below the average with no physical explanation. And I want you to kind of ignore the noise of my children in the back because they're obviously having a really good dinner. But that's okay, because the more you hear that, the more you know that this is real life. This is really happening. And I want you to just go ahead and let it pass. So do you ever dream of UFOs or alien beings? Have you ever awoken from sleep paralyzed with a sense that someone, something, or even a presence was in the room? Now, we're not just talking about restless leg syndrome or certain sleep disorders with sleep paralysis, but an actual experience of waking up with that presence with you. Have you ever experienced lights, orbs, ball lighting, or lights around you for which you have no explanation? For women, have you ever felt certain you were pregnant, but the pregnancy suddenly disappeared? For men, have you ever had issues with erectile dysfunction? Have you ever experienced the feeling that you were flying, not including the out-of-body experience or astral travel, but in your dreams, that you can do this distance flying? Or do you have unexplainable, irrational fears or anxieties about certain areas in your home, such as a certain stretch of the hallway or a certain stretch of the highway? Is there a certain irrational fear associated to a space that doesn't make a whole lot of rational sense? And now answer to yourself honestly. Have you ever been visited by an angelic figure or had a religious vision? Do you get the sensation that you're secretly teaching or helping someone as if you're a gifted prophet, and not just that ego prophecy we have as teenagers that we're special and unique, but that it's persistent, that you're somehow elevated compared to your peers? Have you experienced heightened psychic abilities? And then, of course, something that we're going to talk about in future shows this month. But do you live within 10 miles of a nuclear power plant? So I want you to think about some of these questions. Now, obviously, the alien abduction questionnaire extends to further questions, such as, has anyone in your immediate family felt as though they were abducted or had an alien experience? Or do you have any other certain circumstances, interests in alien abductions? Do you find yourself watching unsolved mysteries beyond just the human experience, but that you have a connection? And then, of course, are you on any medications? Have you been hospitalized for mental health issues? Or have you ever worked with ufologists, or UFO researchers? So these questions, I want you to just kind of reflect on it, what some of your answers were. What were your feelings as you're answering them? Was there this, wow, I think I identify with this questionnaire more than I thought I might? Or is there a complete detachment? Is it very placid and simple for you to read, comprehend, and let pass? Is there a strange thread keeping you connected to such questions? For those of you still listening, there might be that thread. There might be this connection. So let's just kind of talk Alien 101, right? And this is going to help you with future shows this month as we really delve down the rabbit hole or the wormhole of alien abduction. Now, the term alien abduction or abduction phenomenon, both kind of meaning the same thing, describe this subjectively real memories of being taken secretly against your will by a non-human entity and subjected to complex physical, psychological procedures. A big part of the abduction scenario or the abduction phenomenon is that you're taken against your will. Now, people claiming to have been abducted are usually called abductees, victims, or experiencers, so you might hear me use those terms linguistically. But what are the statistics of abduction? How common is the Whitley Strieber experience? How common is the stories that you're going to hear at the Paradigm Symposium from other UFO researchers of this really happening to those around us? Well, some interesting things to consider, especially for those of you tuning in. One is the most common of alien abduction statistics is that it's currently found to be extremely prevalent in English-speaking countries. 6 to 9% of the general population of English-speaking countries claim to have been abducted. So if we just say 10% of the world, we're just going to round up 1% for all of those non-English speaking countries. 10% of the general population claim, undoubtedly, that they have been abducted. Now, typically, in reproductive health, is a common symptom for those abductees or experiencers that they have those issues we mentioned in the questionnaire, that you have polycystic ovarian disease, or that you have fertility issues, or if you're a man that you have erectile dysfunction, or that there's certain aversions to sexual behaviors that are otherwise pretty normal for the human experience and intimacy. Now, assuming that you've not been abused or traumatized in some way, which 1 in 3 people are said to have been, and it's typically women, I find that correlation kind of interesting. Abductees are rarely over the age of 40. It seems like after 40, you're kind of in the clear for the continuation of these experiences, though this is not the case for the famous Whitley Strieber. Another interesting statistic of abduction is child abductions are actually more rare. Now, we don't know, obviously, if this is just because family members are saying it's their imagination, or parents and guardians aren't sure how to categorize the experience, and so obviously children aren't coming forward or know how to come forward with this information. But the majority of abduction stories, and through all of the detailed experiences of abductees, it's usually military-related family and pubescent age groups. It seems to really kind of be prevalent around those who are sexually active, their sexual reproductive organs are functioning. It's boys who are in the masturbation phase, and it's women who have started menstruating up until the age of 40 or until infertility has set in. Now, the most common to seek help from alien abductions are single white females with college education. And the last statistic I want to give you, which is kind of interesting, is post-abduction. Ufologists and researchers have said that abductees seem to be of psychic personalities. Now, I want to kind of give you my little personal insert here because I started working with MUFON and ufologists and other UFO researchers and kind of the alien abduction world when I was 19. And it started when I had a hypnosis regression. I think I was 17 or 18 when I had my first experience, and I did it with my sister. She's kind of one of those kind of kindred spirits and guardians of the paranormal realm for me. She's 8 years older than myself, and her and I decided to embark on this hypnosis regression journey together. Now, my past life hypnosis experience was emotional, very turbulent, but very meaningful to me, but nothing quite out of the ordinary. However, my sister had an experience where once she was hypnotized, she began speaking in a different language. Once the hypnotist suggested she translate for us, she began to describe a sterile environment and use language quite different from her own, and the entire experience scared her and myself quite a bit. But the hypnotist sat there and said, "This is actually not uncommon." The hypnotist said, "There's a branch in hypnosis. There's one part that remains scientific, and there's another part that goes a little alternative." And of course, for me, I was interested in both, but I thought, how fascinating that alternative might go somewhere, that road less traveled, if you will. And so I started to kind of help my sister deal with this experience, which for her was quite traumatic and stressful. And in working with MUFON, local chapters, we'll talk about MUFON briefly, we started to hear stories of other people who had alien experiences, believed they were of another alien race, and who firmly believed that they had been abducted, were being abducted, and will continue to be abducted for the rest of their life, and that it was quite a real experience. Now, at this point, I went through the Missouri Institute of Hypnosis, and I became certified as a hypnotherapist, and I've been doing that since 2005. And I've done past life regressions where people also experienced alien lives, and it's quite crazy. And so even going further down that wormhole, talking with people about abduction regressions, specifically brightening those dark areas of the mind where people have an interest or belief they may have had an experience and they want to learn more. It's kind of similar to the movie The Fourth Kind, only not as Hollywood. But I reached out to someone in the field by the name of Dr. Leo Sprinkle. It's kind of an unforgettable name, right? Well, he has written a plethora of books and done research within ufology that's quite fascinating. And his book, Soul Samples, talks about his own experience going down this wormhole. And he was so generous, he sent me a large box full of his notes and his books and his research and people to reach out to in the field. And one of his most fascinating parts of research was the correlation to nuclear power plant facilities. He was working with another researcher that was coupling UFO sightings and lights in the sky kind of phenomenon to cattle mutilations. And they started to see this pattern that cattle mutilations were happening when there was a 10-mile radius of a nuclear power plant. So then they extended this out all the way across the country. And then they kind of found themselves 60-40, where 60% of the time there was a nuclear power plant within that 10-mile radius, but the other 40% there was nothing. So sadly, the research kind of dropped off. But 11 years later, he received a call. The call was his fellow researcher who said, "You're not going to believe this, Leo. Guess what? Of those 40%, those cases that we couldn't say were in the 10-mile radius of a nuclear power plant, now there's a nuclear power plant there." It's almost as if the UFO sightings, the lights in the sky, the cattle mutilations, time travel, this future knowledge that there would be a nuclear power plant there has come to fruition, that there's this extensive intelligence and kind of sampling of the cattle in reference to nuclear work here on planet Earth. And the research, you can find more about it in some of his books, but they're just ridiculously amazing. And then, of course, Whitley Strieber, Strieber, whichever you prefer, has probably been the most well-known, and we'll talk about him as well. But first, I want to hit on symptoms of an abduction. Now, some of the symptoms, obviously, mostly physical. That seems to come to mind first, right? That you have these marks on your body. Recently, I was watching a National Geographic special where they were talking about Project Saucer in South America. And the marks that these individuals were getting were quite unique. They were like radiation burns or imprints under the skin. Some abductees experience ripped clothing or bruising, a large amount of anxiety, paralysis before and after their abduction. But almost always there is some type of a mark, something left on their body that they can't explain. So, of course, this piques the person's interest. But then, after the marks heal, or the memory fades, or the concern dies, you get the emotional symptoms, the anxiety. The anxiety is typically associated around sexual or intimate relationships, paranoia, compulsive behaviors without explanation. And the anxiety around sexual or intimate relationships seems to come from nowhere. We're not talking like the Situation Room and that maybe you have a new fetish and you're nervous about what your spouse might say, but that you went from being a very sexual person with a comfortability with your spouse or your partner, and now suddenly you don't want to be touched. You don't want to be invaded. You don't feel trusting of anyone touching your body. That this anxiety almost grows and grows and perpetuates to the point that individuals really struggle to continue healthy relationships. And so the emotional bleeds into the mental symptoms. Anxiety, aversion, memory loss, and some of the similar symptoms that people experience with post-traumatic stress syndrome. Sleep disorders, mental health struggles. And again, it perpetuates. And lastly, spiritual. Spiritual symptoms sometimes actually being more positive than negative, that individuals experience a certain peace or enlightenment, and that their psychic abilities or their intuition is heightened. This was another big part of Dr. Leo Sprinkle's research, was he noticed a large correlation between individuals who had experienced or believed to have experienced an alien abduction experience, and then suddenly they had extrasensory perception. They could feel or see experiences before they happened. Their dreams were more easily obtained and recollected, and they were precognitive. Deja vu was happening every day. They could sense people's emotions. They felt connected to the universe. Now, other causes of alien abduction belief could be deception or attention-seeking behavior. In psychoanalysis and in psychology, of course, we talk a lot about false memory syndrome. This is one of those things that we talk about, and Skeptics Magazine, Mr. Mike Shermer, will mention a lot with hoaxes and the alien abduction experience, that false memory syndrome, or FMS, if you like the anagrams, describes a condition in which a person's identity and relationships are affected by their memories, and they're factually incorrect, but strongly believed. That we actually start to grow this figment of our imagination and create a memory, and that we associate it, that fear of not knowing, to something that we already fear, a suggested fear, like the society's concepts and Hollywood's dramatization of aliens. Now, commonly, false memory syndrome is referenced in forensic psychology, what I do professionally, because so often sociopathic behavior or even outside influences, such as traumas, can influence our memory. Witnesses taking the stand, people who've been raped or beaten, assaults, domestic violent victims, people who've experienced major trauma, military soldiers coming from overseas, that false memory syndrome is quite prevalent. Then, of course, also to the skeptics, is temporary schizophrenia. For those of you who are psychologists or you have any experience with the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health, schizophrenia can be difficult, especially if it's temporary. And this is really just the association of symptoms. Some of the symptoms that we mentioned above, the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the paranoia. But of course, other causes could be near sleep mental states. The hypnagogic state that we talked about, that unconscious zoning out, could be the reason for the time lapse or the memory loss. Night terrors or sleep paralysis or restless leg syndrome could be making up for those physical issues. Or drug use, hallucinogenics, DMT, dimethyltryptamine for those of you ravers out there, or ecstasy, or acid, whatever it is you want to call it. Maybe you're having a bad trip. Psychiatrist Rick Strassman found that approximately 20% of volunteers that were injected with high doses of DMT had experienced identical experiences to purported alien abductions. Now, this is 20%. Now, I want to throw this out there because a few of the social networking feedback that we got on Facebook this week talking about alien abduction, it was believed that DMT was that absolute, anytime I have a DMT trip, it's an alien guide, that it's an interdimensional creature. Do you believe this to be true? Because volunteers injected with DMT, only 20% had purported a similar experience to alien abduction. Now, Carl Sagan, one of my dudes, believed that some alien abduction experiences could even be considered a demon abduction, the incubus or the succubus experience. For those of you who are religious, that's a whole nother radio show. But let's talk about common scenarios, right? Let's talk about some of the characteristics. 101, Alien 101. Precognitive events. What do I mean when I say this? If I say something's precognitive, well, sometimes this is associated with anxiety, compulsive behaviors, ominous feelings. A British abduction researcher has called this change of consciousness the Oz factor. If you're interested in precognitive research, the Oz factor might be one of those Google terms for you. But its external sounds cease to have any significance to the experience and fall out of perception. That you have this clarity that something is going to happen. We could call it clairaudient, clairvoyance, some sort of ESP, the sense that you know not to turn right because something ominous is there. You feel this anxiety telling you not to do it. If you turn right, you're going to get in a car accident. Now, usually taken in the nighttime during sleep, uninterrupted or being awakened by bright lights is obviously a characteristic as well. And a lot of the stories that you hear on Unsolved Mysteries or even Nat Geo specials or documentaries on UFOs, you're going to hear the bright lights, that you're being transported into this alien craft, that you have paralysis, right? And the bright lights are a big part of also some of the military conspiracies that we'll talk about next week with Project Saucer, for example, that these lights actually came down and chased people through a third world village, that people were running from this beam of light. And we're seeing beams of light now in the news, are we not? These strange, unexplained lights coming from the sky, and whether or not we think that it's associated with alien abduction. But the paralysis and also the forced medical examinations, almost always sexual in nature, is called the abduction narrative. Now, when someone believes they've had an alien abduction and they go into their abduction narrative, I dare say almost always, I hate to use that phrase, but almost always, there is a sense that this is happening against your will, and there's a sexual undertone. Now, of course, Freudian psychoanalysis jump all over this, right? We say that there's some projection within ourselves, there's some intimacy issues within ourselves, and that the biological urge to relate everything to sexual pleasure makes this external alien, something outside of ourselves that is, in a sense, alien, creating an anxiety about sex. But if you want to cut through the psychobabble, just know that one of the characteristics, almost always, of the abduction narrative is against your will and sexual in nature. Another unique characteristic was something that I found pretty cool in Whitley Strieber's kind of less popular book. Now, of course, he did Communion, and he did that series of his alien abduction experience. But the key, yes, that's the name of the book, the key, shorter, more intense, in my experience. If you're looking for the next good read on your flight somewhere, I would say you can finish it in probably 2 hours. It is a must read. Whitley Strieber's The Key. And he talks about another very common characteristic, which is a given spiritual worldly advice, a warning. And we kind of see this in Ghostbusters, right? Where Bill Murray is sitting there and you've got this girl saying, and that being came in and told me that on Valentine's Day, the world is going to end. And we make a joke about Doomsday, of course, being on Valentine's Day. What a bummer. But really, a very strong characteristic is that these beings are showing us Armageddon. They're giving us these horrible, for some people, that religious apocalyptic vision of what the afterlife and what the rapture is going to look like. And it's terrible. It's scary. And it, of course, perpetuates the anxiety that goes along with the alien abduction experience. But there's also a unique paranoia or anxiety with another characteristic, and that is implantation. This being abducted in the future, due in part to alien intent and programming, that abductees actually think, okay, so I've been abducted, that they know I've been abducted, and that they've implanted something in me. I always remember this horrible 80s horror movie where it was behind the neck. But for some people, it's under the skin. It's a small piece. If you've seen the recent, really good alien abduction movie called The Grey, it was with Felicity, is kind of how I know her. I can't ever remember her real name. But these implants, very common thing found for those having experiences. And sometimes they come up during an MRI or even an X-ray, and there's just no explanation for what it is or how it got there. But there's this paranoia associated with, they've abducted me once and they're going to come back. And if I think about them or if I talk about them, they're going to hear me. And I think maybe that's where the interdimensional association comes in, is that it's another part of your consciousness, or it's another realm of being, that they're not just visiting, from some saucer in the sky and beaming us up like a Star Trek movie, but this implantation, it goes deeper, right? And a lot of abductees will also talk about the paranoia they have around electrical devices like phones. Dial tone tests are sometimes done, metal detectors, magnets over the skin, rare earth magnets from hard drives, things like that. That people will say that they notice a lot of electrical interference, which is one of those cool correlations that we find in the paranormal realm, because you see these ghost hunter shows and they're using K2s and EMF detectors. And saying, oh, the spirit's communicating with me through frequency interaction. But actually, in ufology research and alien abduction experiences, these abductees come in and they struggle, with psychiatrists noticing before ever knowing that it was going to be an abduction narrative, that they're setting their tape recorder and they've got their videos going, and there's this lapse in time. The electric gets cut out, that there's frequency issues, there's static, there's white noise. And you see that in a lot of the Hollywood movies. They do kind of get that right. If you talk about the Skinwalker Ranch, which we'll mention next week, or other documentaries on high alien type areas, this implantation and electrical phenomenon is a really common characteristic. And then lastly, the loss of time. We had mentioned this in the assessment, the alien abduction questionnaire, that you kind of have this, upon return to your place of Earth, you have this loss of memory, this loss of time. Maybe you're in a different location than you were when you went to sleep, when you were abducted. Sometimes it happens where individuals will say, I must have gotten up and walked to the couch because I went to bed in bed, but I woke up on the couch, and that happens 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe I'm just so exhausted or stressed out that I'm getting up and I'm walking to the kitchen and then I just don't go back upstairs, or I don't get back to my bed. Um, but it's just kind of knowing yourself and knowing your patterns. And I dare say for those individuals who seek me out professionally for alien abduction regressions, it's not that they just have the loss of time. It's not just the synchronicity that they're always looking at the clock at 444 or 827 or 111. It's not the numerological phenomenon. It's not the synchronicity of numbers. It's the combination. It's the combination of paranoia and paralysis and fertility issues and loss of time, that you kind of have this concoction that people struggle to live their normal life and they're seeking help however they can, and they find themselves in this, what did we say, 10% of people over the world that believe that they've been abducted. So Alien 101, because we're in the last 10 minutes of the show, I can hardly believe that, is alien characteristics. Now, maybe you are a huge fan of The Situation Room and one of our hosts here at Intrepid Radio, Scotty Roberts, who recently wrote the book, The Reptilians. And even in his book, The Nephilim, where he talks about the Grigori concept and the religious interaction of possible hybrid species here, and how religions have discussed this possible phenomenon of interdimensional creatures throughout human culture. You see it in kind of the Sumerian and the Nibiru and the Mayan cultures. You have these hieroglyphs in Egypt and things that maybe we've mistranslated or maybe we haven't, that suggest a interference or interaction or help, if you will, from beings outside of this earth, watchers, giants. Religiously, I find it so unique that very devout religious people sometimes shun the idea of aliens, even though I must say that the Vatican and Pope recently said they are not against the idea that aliens would exist, but that would incorporate God is still the end all be all, and that he too created aliens. But for those of you who are religious and devout and maybe use that to push away the concept of aliens, I would hope that you look to books that have been banned from the Bible that do interject the idea that other species might exist. But what species are said to exist? For those alien abductees that come forward and they share their experiences, there are 4 big ones, right? Now, you can find books, you can go to Barnes and Noble and you can look up dictionaries of alien beings. You can Google it right now and find a list. I love some of the Fallen series and how Stephen has been writing and illustrating what his idea of interdimensional species looks like or alien creatures look like. But the 4 big ones are, first, the Greys, right? The big-headed Roswell alien with the big beady eyes, the short little guy, right, that we see all coming into our bedroom. But then 2, Scotty Roberts, the reptilian. My Illuminati friends out there, my conspiracy theorists, my blue blood friends, my RH factor believers, the reptilians, the evil, demonic, warrior species. 3, the Nordics. We could do a whole show on any of these, I'm telling you. The Nordics are a little bit more secret. Let's talk Blackwater, maybe. Let's have some guests on here talking about military intervention with missing children, how the Mayans may have interpreted the Nordic messages to abductees. And then lastly, the Egyptian kind of Sumerian theme of the lion people. The lion people are quite interesting, or the Philinists. They don't usually like to share their experiences. They're very ego-driven individuals. And my sister, who is a priestess of Sekhmet in the Egyptian theology, could talk for days about the lion people. If you're interested in that, please let me know. She actually goes by the Philinist, and she would definitely identify with that alien experience. But those are just the most common that are believed to exist. I have had clients that have mentioned many strange, uncharacteristic of these four species, and for that we just don't know. But what do you think? What have you seen? What are your pictures? What are your dreams? Well, a big part of it for those of you listening who may have had an experience might be that you're finally getting some sense of identifying, some sense of, I don't need to have this anxiety, that maybe you're like Strieber, maybe you're like the fire in the sky. Maybe you are putting your story out there in a cathartic manner because you want recovery. You don't want to live with this paranoia. You don't want to live with the anxiety, and you definitely don't want to live with the fear. But instead, you want to put your story out there for the healing and to let others know they're not alone. Well, that's the great thing about technology in this day and age. And for those of us who live in the wonderful country of America, who for the most part, I can't say completely, but are not completely censored, that we can share our stories, that we can Google and we can get books on Amazon and we can read that we are not alone. Maybe it's perception, maybe it's psychology, maybe it's spiritual interpretation. Who's to say? But it is undeniable that a very large part of the human experience, and from cultures way before our time, have mentioned the concept of extraterrestrials. For those scientific non-believers, I love how they often say, it would be stupid to say we're the only people in the universe. Statistically speaking, of all the billions of stars, we cannot be alone. And maybe you just have a poster on the back of your wall that says, I want to believe. Maybe you're not an abductee, or are you? Maybe you need a regression. But for those who are seeking help, a realization event is often what happens first. And we call it post-abduction syndrome, or PAS. And it's a term used by abductees to describe the effects of the abduction. Though it's not recognized by any professional treatment at this time, it's very similar to PTSD. And hypnosis or regression is usually the first step. Then, of course, we have recovered memory therapy, RMT, and it describes a range of psychotherapy methods used on recalling these memories of abuse that have previously been forgotten by the patient or by the abductee, that quite literally it is so out there, it is so traumatic, it is so foreign and so alien that our mind has regressed it, has pushed it down into our unconscious. And until we are ready, and maybe that moment is now, the realization event, that you watch a movie, you read a story, you talk to a person, you see a lecture at the Paradigm Symposium, or you're listening now to the Intrepid Radio and you think, that's me. After your realization event, we do recovered memory therapy. And through recovered memory therapy, which I cannot suggest enough to do with someone that you trust, it doesn't have to be me, it can be anyone. You can even do it to yourself if you have trust issues, which most abductees do. But group treatment is another great part of the therapeutic process, and MUFON is a great place to do that. MUFON is an international organization dedicated to ufology research, and there are chapters near you. Almost every metropolitan city has one, and group treatment, group discussions about the experience. But be careful that you're not getting suggestions before your recovered memory therapy takes place. Then obviously anxiety and sleep treatment. which I must say can correlate to a number or range of therapies that we utilize both in the paranormal and non-paranormal, things that are accepted in the psychological community and things that are not, things that we might do in the parapsychological organization, but there are treatment options out there. But for those of you looking to research, because we're in the last few moments, I want to give you some of those Google terms. If you are willing to, I would love to have discussions with you. I actually do recovery memory therapy over Skype. I can record the audio and you can listen to it on your own time. I can do hypnosis audio that you play in your sleep to help it resurface in its own time. But you can also research Whitley Strieber. Strieber. He's often on Coast to Coast. He's on Darkness Radio. We might even have him on here. We'll see. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who is a Wyoming psychologist. Harvard psychiatrist John Edward Mack, M-A-C-K. He is really well-known, highly esteemed psychiatrist, author of over 150 scientific articles, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and he's kind of become quite interested in the phenomenon since the late 1980s. And so he has some research interviewing like thousands of people and writing books on his subject. But then also, of course, Bud Hopkins. For those of you interested in popular stories, you can always check out the very famous and sometimes noted as first case of UFO in modern day, the Betty Barney Hill of 1961, which has kind of instigated a slew of Hollywood movies. But I'm interested in what your feedback is, of course, on today's show. Next week, we're going to delve into, put our foot down further in the wormhole of government conspiracies. We're going to talk Project Bluebeam, Project Paperclip, Project Pandora, and we are going to really get into Blackwater and some Illuminati concepts as well, and how that might intertwine with aliens and what may or may not be in an X-File. And why has America not released its X-Files when other countries have? Would it surprise you to know that other first world countries have released their X-Files to the public, and it absolutely says we are not alone? If you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to join me next week here on IntrepidRadio.com, Mysteries of the Mind, with me, your host, Sarah Soderlund. Until then.